Chevy Chase. Sir, I'm going live. Hey, good day, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, live from Israel, the ethics of the fathers with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. And this week has been an exciting one. Rabbi Coffman had 2 new grandsons this week. Big news, big news, big news. It's been 2 weeks since our last class, and I really missed it last week. I really don't enjoy having to miss one lesson from Israel of Torah and the ethics of the fathers. Just something we all can benefit from. We all can find a way to integrate it. I'm not going to be leaguer. Let's tune in. I think we're still continuing with chapter 2, Mishnah 5, right, Rabbi? You're live on the air, sir.
It's a pleasure to be here. That is where we're holding chapter 2, Mishnah 5. I do want to thank all the well wishers. Got a lot of good mazel tov, whatever. It's not it's not often that you have 2 grandsons in 1 week. Even though my 2 daughters were due the same day, we're gonna say, okay, what's gonna be? What happens if they actually? I mean, they were giving birth at the same hospital, but what's going to be if they both go at the same time. So these are one of the things the Talmud says we have no control over, right? We've lost control over when a person knows they're going to give birth, even though, there are certain signs and different things and whatever, that go on, but we don't know. It's not it's something that's been lost. Even if doctors give you a due date, you could be before, you could be a little bit after, you could be a week after, whatever it is, but thank God that both babies are healthy. There's a custom, Friday night people come and wish mazel tov. So during COVID, it's a little bit problematic having so many people. So I was going to do it on my porch, and then then it's forecast to rain. So at the last minute, we did it in somebody's tent. It was outside. It was like I would say it's about 5-6 degrees Celsius, and whatever, it rained, it stopped. It wasn't,
cool.
You had enough people there, so it wasn't really so cold. And I told people as well, I said, what are you worried about the cold? We got booze. We got booze, going to keep you nice and warm. So we had a good time till, I don't know, about 10:30, whatever it was. So friends of my son-in-law came. It was nice. People sang, people came, which mazel tov, we got plenty of leftovers.
Beautiful.
As well. But it's, it's an amazing thing, just on this thing to see, you see the continuation. You see what they call the hemshech of the next generation, right? The next generation. Most people want to have kids. At least, someone, once you're no longer in this world, that you have a remembrance, and maybe someone come visit you at the cemetery or whatever. But when you see that next generation, you see that next generation already, and you see, thank God that kids are going in the right, in the right direction. I always say when Torah works well, it goes unbelievable. When Torah fails, when a person fails in Torah, meaning the secular, they intermarry, other things, they go straight down. So it's either you go all the way up, you have the potential to go, to reach unbelievable heights, and at the same time, a person could go, all the way down. You look at the end of Book of Ruth. The end of Book of Ruth is like, 4 or 5 generations, right? From Boaz, she's married to Boaz, and then her kids to get to King David. Imagine, she saw all those generations. She saw 4 or 5 generations. She lived, well, the whole question, how many years she lived? She was very old, right? But in general, seeing that amount of people, that came out of you 5 generations later is pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing thing. So, as I always say, when it works well, it works well. When a person doesn't utilize it, then, it is what it is. So I have tremendous reason, to be blessed. It's an unbelievable blessing. And as the saying goes, if we would have known how great grandkids are, we would have had them first. The problem is you have to go through your kids, right? But it's, they come, they make a mess, they leave, at some point. Or, your son-in-laws come in, they read the fridge and, whatever it is. I remember one of my daughters first married, she comes in, she made this whole nice lunch for her husband and left a mess. All the...
and walked away.
Fans, different things, and okay, that's part of the path also. But a lot of good, a lot of things, definitely, no question about it. To be thankful for, and again, I want to thank all the well wishers. It was very much appreciated. A lot of virtual love there. It's nothing.
Well, Rabbi, let me give you some love. Today, I think today is our 51st episode together. 51st. It's just been awesome.
Our 51st, and we never had a fight. Yeah.
No, you're just too much fun. You are just too much fun. And when you get going on a roll, it allows me to soak in Torah. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. So we are with that introduction, we are in, again, chapter 2, Mishnah 5. This is an unbelievably packed Mishnah over here. So we spoke a few weeks back, not separating yourself from the community, right? Which we're still in the middle of. And I think we're going to hopefully, I can't say hopefully, we'll see how far we get about not believing in yourself, right? I think we did start with that, right? Didn't we start about not believing in yourself to the day you die, right? We did speak a little bit about that, because we spoke about Yochanan Kohen Gadol, right? Yochanan, the high priest, was the high priest. I guess we'll just review here. He was a high priest for 80 years. In the end, 80? Even though he was a high priest, that means he went into the Holy of Holies. And every Yom Kippur, he came out unscathed. Now, there were unscrupulous people who wanted to be the high priest. Wasn't done, right? Was not done according to, obviously, merit, etc. So they wanted to be the high priest, do all these sacrifices. But what's the height of being the high priest? Going in the Holy of Holies of Yom Kippur. So if you're not properly prepared spiritually to go in the Holy of Holies, well, guess what's going to happen? You will die. That's exactly what's going to happen.
I heard they tied a cord.
What happened? So these people lasted 6 months, depends when they took over, right? They lasted 6 months, 8 months. They didn't last more than a year, because at some point they have to go into the Holy of Holies, right? And they go into the Holy of Holies and they're not prepared and they're not ready spiritually, they will die. That's exactly what will happen. Comes along Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Yochanan Kohen Gadol was the high priest for 80 years. For 80 years, and in the end it became a Sadducee, i.e. a Karaite. Come on, where are my haters? Right? He became a Karaite. Checkmate. Became a Karaite, only believing in authority of the Torah, without oral law. Right? Now, the question really becomes, how is someone the high priest
of 80 years?
For 80 years, comes in and out of the Holy Holies unscathed. Unscathed, and in the end, it becomes a Karaite, right? He becomes a heretic. So the simple explanation is it doesn't make sense, right? The only thing we can say, is that as great as this person was, he did not internalize the message properly, right? So for 80 years, he was able to come out unscathed, but there was something wrong. There was something wrong with the Torah he learned, right? There was something wrong with, his outlook in Jewish philosophy. Something got messed up somewhere where he ends up being an absolute heretic. Now, the explanation is, for some reason, at some level, whatever level it is, he 100% did not internalize the message, right? That's what we have to say. Because if he internalized the message, then there's no possible way he could make such a mistake, right? We also see by King Solomon, right, at the end of his life, also lost the kingship, right? Seemingly also lost the kingship. So the general rule is, if a person lives out most of their lives without having sinned, and at the end of their lives, hopefully it should be the same, right? But here we realize, even though this may be true in general, then it can still happen. In other words, even if most of their life they lived proper Torah lives, they learned, they kept Shabbos, they kept kashrus, they kept exactly what they needed to keep, right? But in the end, they went sour, right? The general rule is that should not happen. I can understand if a person started out in a negative way, and then the evil inclination got him later, right? We'll give an example because Monday is going to be the first circumcision of one of my grandkids. And as I was telling you before, no one knows the name because parents don't, the name's only called out after the circumcision. Yeah. So there are a number of honors that are given at the circumcision. One is you have somebody that brings in the baby. That's one honor. Someone puts on the chair of Elijah the prophet. Because Elijah the prophet said some negative things against the Jewish people. So God says, "Oh, you really think my people are not that special and they do things wrong? I'm going to send you every single bris." Right? There's going to be some spark of Elijah the prophet that goes to every single Jewish bris. And bris meaning circumcision. Right? So there's a special pillow that the baby goes on. They put it on a special chair. This is the chair for Elijah the prophet, etc. And then the major honor is what we call the sandak. The sandak is the one who holds the baby, right? He's the one who holds the baby. It's like putting the baby on an altar, right? That's why you cannot use a secular Jew who doesn't keep Shabbos. It doesn't matter if they're the great-great-grandfather. You can't use them. Spiritually you can't give them the greatest honor. Why not? Based on a technicality, they don't keep Shabbos. They have the status of a non-Jew. You're infusing in the child spirituality, right? So, to go to a grandfather or to go to a great rabbi, whoever, as long as, they keep Shabbos, that's the most important thing because you're putting your child on an altar. Now, you're going to say, what can happen? What's so bad? So even if you have a secular Jew, it doesn't keep Shabbos, okay, it's got the status of a non-Jew, whatever, but who cares? What, so they hold the baby. What's so bad? What could really happen? So let's go to the famous story of Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya. Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya, otherwise known as Acher. What does Acher mean? Means the other one. Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya was a member of the Sanhedrin. He was a famous Rebbe of Rebbe Meir. Right? Rebbe Meir learned under him. But he was a heretic. In the end, he became a heretic. And what happened to him was, again, he sat on the Sanhedrin. He could not have been a slouch, no question about it. You have to know 7 languages. You had to be a major Torah scholar over here. So what happened to him? What happened to him? So he ended up going off. He read other philosophies that he shouldn't have read. But one thing that made him go off, finally, and I'll tell you what happened at the beginning, in the second, was that he saw a child doing 2 mitzvahs. He was doing the mitzvah of honoring his parents, and he was doing the mitzvah of shiluach hakein. Shiluach hakein meaning sending away the mother bird while the mother bird is hovering over the eggs. Right now, the Talmud says, anyone who says, oh, you push away the mother bird, you're going to make egg drop soup, right? Egg drop soup, all these PETA activists, are going to start sending us viruses and all that, right? Don't tell them this. But they can say, oh, it's so cruel. How can Jews do that? It's a terrible thing. It's cruel, right? Talmud says, you say that, you're 100% a heretic. It's a decree. We don't understand it, right? 100%, it's a decree. So what happened? So there was a story. The Talmud says, a child, father tells him, I want you to go up and do the mitzvah of shiluach hakein. I want you to push away the mother bird. Mother bird's in a nest, right? And the child climbs up on a ladder, pushes away the mother bird, falls off the ladder and dies. The child falls off the ladder and dies. Now, what is the reward for honoring a parent and doing shiluach hakein? It's the only 2 commandments we have in the Torah that the Torah says clear you will get long life. Right? If you honor your parents properly, you get long life. If you do shiluach hakein, you push away the mother bird, you will get long life. Comes along Elisha ben Abuya, I understand. This child is doing what the father said. How could the child die? How could the child fall? You got 2 mitzvahs. You have 2 mitzvahs of long life. Come on, the rabbis, and tell us Elisha ben Abuya was wrong. Because even though the Torah says you're going to get long life, what does long life mean? You're not going to live to 120 years. You're not going to live to 115 years. It means long life in the next world. Now, I've gotten this question a number of times. How can a person have long life in the next world? Does it mean that they're going to die in the next world? No. What it means is that they have a portion of the world to come, which hopefully they do. So their mitzvahs will grow exponentially based on who they left in this world. In other words, if you have kids going in the right direction, all the mitzvahs they do, right, you get a credit for it. You definitely get credit for it. If you do the wrong thing, right, and let's say kids go in the wrong path, what's the obligation to educate kids? Comes on the parents, right? Really comes on the father. But what do? We send our kids to school. But still, the greatest education comes from the parents. They could have bad influences in school, God forbid, right? But at the same time, the main obligation is on us. We can't just leave it to the teachers, and all that to educate. We have to educate also, because the kids look at the parents as role models, for better or for worse, right? So over here, and we'll get to the beginning what happened to Elisha ben Abuya, but the rabbi said he made a big mistake. He made a big mistake. It wasn't talking about this world, right? It wasn't talking about this world. It was talking about the next world. So it comes on the Ben Ish Chai. Ben Ish Chai, one of the Torah giants in Baghdad more than 100 years ago. And he's got a commentary on these homiletic passages in the Talmud. And it's either 100% Kabbalah or it's very easy to understand. It's like nothing in between, right? He was a major Kabbalist. And he would give over, these sermons, about these homiletic passages, to people who worked, right? People in the synagogue, right? So it's like, imagine it was people in the synagogue were. Can't imagine, right? Can't imagine who they were. So what does the Ben Ish Chai say? So the Ben Ish Chai says, first of all, he didn't complete the mitzvah, right? Remember, what is the child's, what is the command of shiluach hakein? The command of shooing away the mother bird that's exactly what you have to do. You have to shoo away the mother bird, and you take the eggs. If you didn't take the eggs, even if you shoot away the mother bird, you didn't do the mitzvah, right? You did not complete the mitzvah, right? Not only that, he didn't do what his father told him to do. In other words, you're honoring your father. Sorry, this child's honoring his father He's going to do the mitzvah, but he didn't finish. Since he didn't finish the mitzvah, says the Beneficiary, then he didn't fulfill what his father said. And he didn't finish the mitzvah. In either case, he didn't do what he was supposed to do. Therefore, he explains the Talmud that Elisha ben Abuya made a huge mistake. Made a huge mistake understanding what the verses meant. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Someone does not become a heretic overnight, right? The evil inclination is very strong. The greater the person, greater spiritually, the greater the evil inclination, right? The evil inclination is not going to tell someone, has been keeping Torah mitzvah for a long time, you will desecrate Shabbos.
No.
You will bow down to this guy on a stick.
Subtle drip.
Right? Or a short little fat guy. You're going to bow down to fatso over here. Right? What's the person going to say? Go blow it out your ear. Go take a long walk off a short pier. You're not going to listen. Right? But all the evil inclination needs is to furrow a little bit and make a hole in your armor. Once he furrows a little bit, even if you say, okay, I'm not going to give in to this, person gave in a little bit, whatever it is, then the evil inclination says it's only a matter of time, right? In other words, it's kind of like termites in a certain way. They just keep gnawing, they don't stop, right? They just keep, until they just destroy everything in its sight, right? So the evil inclination says, I got plenty of time, and then let's say a person's guard is down. What happens? They're going to end up, they make a little bit hole in the armor. Then they make a little bit bigger hole. Even if they repent, part of the hole is still there, right? So the evil inclination comes, okay, let's get him to do something else. Let's get him to think something else. Let's get him to see something they shouldn't see. And then it expands. And then once it expands, and a person, God forbid, goes out of control, then it can happen. But it can happen over a span of a number of years, right? It's not, it doesn't have to be a week. It doesn't have to be a month. It could be years.
Yeah.
It could be, a person. There are stories of people, unfortunately, in the Orthodox world that burn out. Like, let's say, have a midlife crisis. They've been ultra-Orthodox Jews, for most of their life, or let's say, for all of their life. Let's say, and they just get burnt out. They just get burnt out, right? So what can happen? So there is such a thing of, people in mid-age just leaving the fold of Judaism because it's too hard, because it's, I don't know, they're just doing it by rote and they want to give in to other things, whatever it is. There is a phenomenon. Right? I'm not going to say not. There is, there is a phenomenon with such a thing. How does that happen? Right? So I'll explain to you how it happens. It's because the Judaism wasn't strong to begin with. Right? Even if you're born into it, you have to keep the fire lit. Right? This is probably more my Hasidic side coming out here. You're not doing things because you don't want to, have blemishes on your family. Right? You want your kids to get married. You want all these good things spiritually. You don't necessarily want to put in, all the effort, but there are certain things you don't want to do, because of how it's going to look, right? How other people are going to vision it. But the problem is that, if a person doesn't internalize the message, as we mentioned by Yochanan Kohen Gadol, if you don't interpret the message properly, right? You don't internalize the message, then what's going to be? And what's going to be is the person's not going to want to keep eventually. Or they'll just do things by rote. Right? Doing things by rote is akin to spiritual death. Right? We say every day before the Shema that God is Mechadesh B'chol Yom Tabi. God renews creation every day. We have to look that we're renewed every day and live our lives accordingly. But what's the problem? Problem is we get beaten down in life. Right? We have different things that happen.
Yep.
A lot of negative things that can possibly happen that knock us down. Now, does that mean I'm not going to pray? Doesn't necessarily mean that, right? You pray differently when you're getting knocked around, right? That is true. But if you're working hard, and you're trying, why should it that, why should a person, get sickness, have livelihood issues, have spousal issues, kids issues, all of them combined? There are many things a person can go through. right? There's no question. So when a person's getting beaten down, isn't it much harder to live an inspired life? Yeah, but God says, well, what do you think's beating you down, you idiot? I'm the one beating you down. Why am I beating you down? Why in the world am I beating you down? Because I want you to repent. I want you to come back. I want you to do the right thing. When it comes to tsaras, person, God forbid, speaks lashon hara against somebody else, right? A person can get tsaras on the body, right? A person can get it on his clothes. A person can get it on his house, right? How does God give a person, somebody, suffering? Usually something happens around them, right? Something can happen around them, and if something happens around them, then what do we say? That, okay, I should get the message. I should get the message that, I have to change, right? If that doesn't work, then God can hit you in your pocket, right? If that doesn't work, he can hit you in the body. But he gives you an opportunity. But, in other words, we could see many things around us, whether it happens to Jews or non-Jews, doesn't matter. Tsunamis, earthquakes, sickness, all these things. And God does all these things for the Jewish people. It's all for us. If it's all for us, then we have to get the message. Right? Again, even if it happens to non-Jews, it doesn't matter. But a person can see, somebody who's homeless, somebody who's paraplegic, other things, even if they did it to themselves, right? Even if someone now is paralyzed because, they're involved in a bank robbery, they got shot, something happened to them, whatever it is, okay. But it's a message for us. You gotta say, well, I'm not gonna be involved in a bank robbery. I'm not gonna be involved in these other things. But yeah, yesh din v'yesh dain. There's judgment, there's a judge. Right? So we have to see what goes on around us. And if we don't see what goes on around us, that should affect us, should make us think, then God says, okay, you're not getting the message. Let me hit it. Let me get you a little bit, let me hit home. Then the person has a problem with their car. They have a problem with, health. Whatever. Or let's say before health. You get hit in the pocket, right? That doesn't get you. God will hit you in the body. So you're going to say, well, why doesn't God hit you in the body first? Right? Why smack you upside the head first? Because he wants to give you a chance. He wants to give you the ability, right, to understand what you have, right? If you don't get the message, then God can knock you around in other ways, in a negative way, right? He doesn't want to have to do that. But, there are many things God can do over here. And, we have to get the message, right? So, when it comes to suffering, if we can't figure out what we've done wrong, normally we would say, the Talmud says, that it's Yisurim Shel Ahava. It's suffering based out of God's love for us. Because he wants us to be squeaky clean in the next world. But that's not for us. That's not, they're going to say, oh, I didn't really do anything wrong. I can't figure it out, so it must be that. Well, if you're in that high of a level, good luck. Right? Most of us are not. Probably a million, I could be here for the next day and a half, telling you things what a person potentially could do just by their thoughts, by actions, that, if it wasn't for this, probably for this. If it wasn't for that, it could be this. The list goes on, right? It's amazing we don't get whacked even more, right, for all the things we do. Question.
Well, Rabbi, I came to the position this morning, isn't imperfection part of the human condition? I mean, isn't imperfection part of the human condition? And I realize that we need to grow and be better tomorrow than we were today, or be better today than we were yesterday, 100%. And us out here in the 70 nations trying to understand, how to walk right. We've never known. And reality isn't imperfection part of the human condition? And I love how the rabbis teach about potential. Understand that it's potential. But I mean, the magnifying glass of ultimate perfection, isn't imperfection part of it?
I mean, doesn't God say in the book of Genesis, all our thoughts are really evil, right, from the very beginning? Right? We have an evil inclination, after we get a good inclination by the age of 20. Right? The evil inclination's there right away. Right? Right away. So God knows where we're holding. God knows the status of man. God
I don't ever want to justify.
That's why he says, I'm never going to wipe you out again. Right? I'm never going to wipe you out again. But doesn't he also say there are going to be repercussions for your actions? Now, repercussions for your actions doesn't mean you're always going to die. I mean, it depends what you do. There could be negative commands, right? There could be just wasted time. There could be positive commands you didn't do. There could be things you did. You're liable to get spiritually cut off, right? If, let's say you ate any leavened product on Passover willingly, right? You get spiritually cut off. A number of things. Or a person could get the death penalty, doesn't keep Shabbos, right? Desecrate Shabbos in public, is a homosexual, whatever. I mean, there are a number of things over here. A person gets the death penalty for, right? But in the end, we're living with a book of instructions. The book of instructions say, do this, don't do this, right? There is repentance. Person cannot say, even by non-Jews, but a person cannot say, well, I'll do this transgression, then I will repent. That you're not allowed to do. That 100% is forbidden, right? Wouldn't that be so easy? Okay, I'm going to eat the shrimp tomorrow. I'm going to eat the shrimp right now. God don't understand because I'm going to repent. No, it doesn't work. Yeah. That repentance is not worth anything.
That's true.
Person can always repent. There is repentance by a non-Jew. We see by the book of Jonah, right? We see by Nineveh, right? Repentance doesn't exactly work the same way by a non-Jew, but there is repentance. But the punishment is much more severe, because you're not going to come and tell me that, after 120 years, they get upstairs, get upstairs, and God's going to say, no, too bad, you blew it. So what do you mean I blew it? He said, well, didn't you hear about the no-hide laws? So I was supposed to know that. So God said, what are you talking about? These things are obvious. Because they're obvious, in general, they're going to get slaughtered. I don't have to go out there, right? I've gotten this complaint a number of times. I should be out there educating non-Jews about the no-hide laws. Really? Are you that stupid? You don't understand? You're not allowed to kill? That that you're not allowed to, do idolatry, right? You're gonna say, but that's how he was born. Yeah, but God gave you a brain. Does it make sense to bow down to a guy in a stick? Does it make sense that whole book is a bunch of trash and what they wrote and all the inconsistencies and all these things? God gave you a brain. Doesn't matter. You grew up in India, you grew up somewhere else. You find out this information if you want. You're going to say, but that's a terrible thing. And how could it be? And why would God do that? Because God said, don't transgress Coffman's 615th commandment, which is don't be a moron, right? There's ample evidence out there. You don't have to have 120 IQ. You can have a 75 IQ, 50 IQ, as long as you're not brain damaged, right? You can have a high enough IQ to figure things out. At the end of the day, it's not my job, right? I mentioned this, go back in my video in Tanakh Talk. It's not my job or the job of any Jews to teach non-Jews about their laws. Their obligation is to seek out me, to understand what they're supposed to do, because these things are obvious. We're not talking about things they're going to get slaughtered for. They say, gee, I didn't know I wasn't allowed to play with creation. Right? There's a whole question. Can I take a donkey and a horse and make a mule? Well, who says you're allowed to play with creation? Maybe they're not going to figure that out. But let me give you an inkling over here. What is a donkey and a horse? What does that create? A mule. Mule is an unbelievably strong animal. One problem with the mule: sterile. Now, think about the genetics. No matter what you do, this mule will never reproduce. Don't you think? If the mule won't reproduce, let's use our thinking cap. Doesn't that mean or show I shouldn't necessarily play with creation? Take a peach and a plum. Make a nectarine. Can I take that nectarine and make another nectarine? I don't know. I don't think so. Right? You have to combine them. Doesn't that show by logic? Torah logic would show that if you can't reproduce it, but you played with creation, God doesn't stop you, but there's a kanas. There's a punishment. There's a fine. Sorry, there's a fine. That's proper definition. Yeah. There's a fine over here. What's the fine? It will not reproduce by itself. Right? Now, logic would dictate. If it doesn't reproduce by itself, right, what is the purpose of that? It means don't do it. A Jew's not allowed to do it. There is a question by a non-Jew, right? If a non-Jew is gonna get punished for the fact that they put a peach in a plum and create a nectarine, or they put a donkey and a horse together. But the question is, okay, you got to say, well, what's the issue? The issue is playing with creation. Who says they're allowed to play with creation? Who says they're allowed to make new species? Right? They're going to say, well, maybe that's not so obvious. Maybe. But again, it's not my job. Not a job of any Jew, any rabbi to be out there, looking for non-Jews to educate them. If they come to you, it's one thing. Say, hey, but you're doing that.
Oh, I'm thankful.
But I said, I put up classes. People want to tune in. They can, that's their choice. I'm not trying to convince them to keep the Noahide laws. Not my job.
No,
right?
we're
I'm
thankful.
just telling people what I do.
Yeah.
Let them figure it out themselves. Right? But people complain. And they say, look at all these Hindus. They were brought up as Hindus. Yeah, I was also brought up as a conservative Jew. Really reformed. Right? I came out of it. I know other people came out of it. And there are millions of people stuck in it. Right? Can't they see the same thing? They can see the same thing. Right? I interviewed a number of people just on this thread. I interviewed a number of people who's going to write this book about, people who came Bali Tshuva, came back to Judaism, and, didn't grow up as religious Jews. And I asked one person, became religious at the age of 35, in their mid-30s, and their kids all went to Jewish schools, etc. And it's actually one of these sons is my son-in-law's father, right? To boot. So anyway, I was interviewing him, and he said that's not the question. The question is not how did I become religious. The question is why did I see the same thing as my siblings and they didn't change and only I did. Right? That's the question. Right? But you can see the same thing. Okay. So you see the Torah is not an inheritance because I see something doesn't mean someone else sees the same thing. Right? But today we're living in a blind generation. They're not even looking at the information. It's all based on if I put ketchup or mustard on my hot dog. They don't want to hear the information. They just want to say you're a fanatic, doesn't make sense, you're against women, all these things. Yeah. Why? Why? Because they don't want to change. They don't want to admit that they're living their life, in my language, as a travesty of a mockery of Hashem. Because then they're intermarried, then what do they do? Then what about their kids? Right? So the argument here is that God gave everybody a brain. There's a medrash. I'll give one other example. There's a medrash. Fisherman gets up to heaven. God says, how come you didn't learn Torah? Right? 2 questions. First, you're going to be asked. Were you honest in business? And did you learn Torah? So the question, which question comes first? Regardless, comes along God and says in the medrash, did you learn Torah? Says, what are you talking about? How can I learn Torah? You didn't give me a brain to learn Torah. Right? Comes on the medrash. God says, well, what did you do? How did you make a parnasa? How did you make a living? So he told them about the intricate nets, that he made, and he tied together, and how he went into the ocean, and what he did, and how he trapped the fish, and all these things. He says, that's how I made a living. So God says, you know what? He says, I bet the same God that gave you the brains to make the nets to capture the fish is probably the same God that gave you brains to learn his Torah. Imagine hearing that, and you realize your life is over. Your life is a travesty of a mockery of Hashem. There's no merit. You're toast. You're toast. So yeah, there are people all over the world stuck in idolatry, right? Stuck in Hinduism, stuck in other things. Is the information out there? Everyone's on the internet, right? Even in India, even poor places, right? They're out there. They can find out information,
sure. Right?
Why in the world is that my obligation? If it's something that's obvious. There may be things that may not be as obvious. Maybe, right? Maybe I'll cut you some slack. I'm in a good mood, right? 2 grandsons this week. I'm in a great mood. Okay, so I'll cut you some slack. But for the most part, it's 100% obvious. You don't have anywhere to hold. You don't have anywhere to stick your head in a hole. You, in my language, you are toast. Toast, baby. It's over. Because it's obvious. It's obvious. Right? That's not my obligation. Definitely not my obligation. But you have to, God also gave us a brain. Unless a person is mentally challenged. God forbid, there's not going to be a safe one.
Cognitive dissonance, Rabbi. Cognitive dissonance kicks in so hard with a lot of people.
But that's true.
The Dunning-Kruger effect.
You're right, but people sound very stupid. as intelligent as they are, right? Go back to my Tanakh Talk video about cosmology, right? I brought down Stephen Hawking and I brought down Einstein. And it was proven mathematically that the world is an expanding universe. Now, both, Hawking came out with all this information, all this evidence, right? So, and seemingly Einstein didn't disagree, right? Totally agree. The only problem is where it all come from and how is it still expanding, right? They didn't have an answer scientifically. But what did they both say? They both said emphatically, we are not giving into the creationists. We are not giving into the Bible. Okay, what's the other alternative? So I mentioned this, a number of times. The only other alternative is you have to come with an answer in science. You don't have an answer in science, so I would be obnoxious and say, hey, Steve, find me an answer. The only other answer they have for anything in science is evolution. We know evolution's been disproven. We know they've never, ever found the missing link, right? But why do they hold on to evolution? Why do they hold on to that straw, so to speak, that's easily broken? Because it doesn't, the only other alternative is the Torah, is the Bible, right? So now, you got some of the greatest minds in the last century, right? They absolutely 100% refuse to give in to what the Torah says. So my question is, what's the alternative? We're still searching. We're still searching in cosmos. We're still searching in science. That's not an answer. You've been searching 50 years, 70 years, 100. When do you give up and say you'll never, ever find the answer? The problem is, as you mentioned, it's called cognitive dissonance, right? Stephen Hawking, at the end of his book, A Brief History in Time, basically says, I proved the creation is right, but you can't listen to any of my proofs, and he throws it out. How in the world can you do that intellectually? I'm not a scientist. I'm not a physicist, right? But if there's evidence against you, and you have nothing to answer, you have to at least admit that the Bible has a shake, as my father would say, a blessed memory. The Bible has a shake over here, meaning that there could be truth to what the Bible says. You can't just throw it out and say, these creationists, they're backwards, they're this, they're a bunch of fanatics. Yeah, we're all a bunch of a lot of things. So I would say, okay, Steve and Al, I'll call them Steve and Al and Steve, right? So give me an answer. Give me a scientific answer that works. If you don't have a scientific answer, you have to at least, and they will never do this, well, they're dead anyway, but any of their followers will never do this, and they'll never say the Bible has a shake. The Bible has a chance to be true. They'll never, ever say it because it goes against science, but they don't have any other answer. Right? That's, I would ask them. They say, but we got evolution and we got this, but it doesn't work because, there are too many things against it, right? We don't have a missing link. You'll never find the missing link, right? All these other things that don't work because of it. So find me another answer, but that's all we have. But all of science, all the academics, they all believe in evolution. They're all drinking the same Kool-Aid. Why? Because there's only one other alternative. That other alternative is God. That's the other alternative. God, the Bible. That's it. You don't have any other alternative. I mean, unless you're on LSD, then you can have 10 alternatives. But you have to come up with some other alternative, right? Yeah, question.
Well, Rabbi, you've really had me review this a lot over the last several weeks that we do chat. Because I've always been, really keen, and I know that the Torah is very clear on equal weights and measures. But from me to you, you've had me think and research it deep, especially these last 2 weeks between our classes. And I find that if you just look at the history of what science is, if you just look at the history of it, 200 years ago it didn't exist. It was the review of nature is all it was. And so looking at the compatibility between the two, we need to understand that according to true academics, science is nothing more than methodological naturalness. So that's the phrase they use, methodological naturalness. In other words, the methodology of nature.
Keep in mind, we live in a Greek world, right? What was Aristotle
Western culture,
talking?
sure.
What was their big thing? They can't see outside of what we see and what we understand, right?
Yeah.
If they
There's
can't
more than the methodology. I get
it. Then they're limited. And they'll say, oh, by religious people, it's a leap of faith, it's this and that. Yeah, it can all be proven, right? It definitely can be proven if people want to be able to see it, right? But if they're going to still say the claim, well, I can only understand up to a point. But you're not willing to go beyond that. And when you're limited in that sense, then you're stuck. Because you say, well, I can't believe this. That's what got Haman killed.
Oh, there's so much out there. Hashem is grand.
This is what got Haman, or Mr. Haman, got killed in the book of Esther. We're getting, another 3.5 weeks to Purim. At the end of the story, he's lying on Esther's bed or couch or whatever it was, begging her, that he shouldn't die. And meanwhile, Ahasuerus comes in and says, what, you scoundrel? You gonna take my wife in front of me? He was pinned down by angels. God opened his eyes. He was pinned down by angels, the Talmud says, right? But he doesn't believe in the supernatural. He's Amalek, right? Amalek does not believe in the supernatural. So if Amalek doesn't believe in the supernatural, what's he going to say? I got angels pinning me down, killed by his own motto, right? Can't go beyond that. So if a person's limited in that sense, you're right. There is a ton of evidence out there. You have to have the eyes to see. And if you don't have the eyes to see, you say, oh, we'll find it. We'll find that missing link. But how far do you go? They haven't found it in the last 100 years, right? How far in the world do you go in order to prove something that doesn't make sense, right? Even if you go according to Genesis and the Big Bang, right? In Dr. Schroeder's book, the difference in DNA, right? For a monkey, when was a monkey? The fifth day, right? It was created the fifth day. Even if you tell me the fifth day was 1 billion years, right? And it's only a 1% difference in DNA, says Dr. Schroeder, mathematically is not enough time if there's a mutation every second.
Randomly.
If there's a mutation every second, you'll never change a monkey into a human.
Randomly.
Systemic
right? Is different.
Right. You'll never do it. You'll never do it. That's a monkey. That's not a paramecium to a hydra. That's not a hydra to a caterpillar. It's not a caterpillar to a rodent. It's not a rodent to a bigger animal. It's not a bigger animal to a human. That's
but a grass, Rabbi, a grass to a flower. A stem, something coming that grows out and then pops out a flower. We can say that the flower is distinct, but I mean, if you just follow the vegetation, there is crystal clear. I mean, animals, you're into a degree of complexity, but I mean, the theme, but I cannot in sane thinking ever say Hashem didn't create it. I can't. That would be insane to say such. The Torah is truer on levels that I think are going to be understood clearer in 1,000 years, clearer in 2,000 years. Hashem willing, humanity exists in 4,000 years, in 10,000 years, that 1,000,000 years down. That.
But also keep in mind, science has only uncovered a fraction.
It's just methodology.
Fraction.
I agree 100%
out there. Now, does that mean? Just for instance, the laws of kasher is about eating non-kosher animals. It affects the Jew differently than a non-Jew, right? But it hasn't been proven scientifically. We don't eat scavengers, right? We don't eat animals of prey.
I know, it's profound. It puzzles my mind.
And there are a whole bunch of different reasons possibly why. It ends up being a decree. Doesn't affect non-Jews because you see they eat all kinds of things. Doesn't affect them. But the bottom line is someone's going to say, hey, science hasn't proven it. Well, big whoop. So what if science hasn't proven it? There are a million things science hasn't proven.
Yeah,
right?
The honor.
Not true.
The honor that you do it.
Before there were telescopes, microscopes or whatever, there was a whole thing about what do you call it? About cells, about how cells work, but I didn't see them. But they claimed it's absolutely fact based on scientific data. No one said, oh, it's a leap of faith. How probabilities. Bible. Science is the Bible. People have drank the Kool-Aid like no tomorrow.
No.
No tomorrow. even though there was no proof before microscopes, right? So how can they say that with certainty? Oh, I got scientific proof. I got all these different things. I got all these different theorems to show it. Yeah, but it's also a leap of faith, right? You have to buy into that.
Of course.
But let's not get sidetracked here. What happened?
Sorry, sir.
Let's go back. What happened to Elisha ben Abuya at the beginning?
Right.
When Elisha ben Abuya was born, his father was very close to the higher ups in Rome. So his father invited all the rabbis to come, to the circumcision. Rabbis come, they're sitting learning Torah, and it's brought down. What happened? Pillar of fire comes down, surrounds them. So Elisha ben Abuya's father says, "Hey, coming to burn down my house? What are you doing?" He said, "Nah, that's the power of Torah. That's the power of Torah, surrounded by this fire, the spiritual fire, etc." So says Elisha ben Abuya's father. He says, "Wow." He says, "That's the power of Torah." He says, "I want that for my son." Now, what did Elisha ben Abuya's father do at the bris, at the circumcision? He held the baby. He held his son. So the intention of his father, as the circumcision is being done, was that he wanted his son to be great in Torah and be able to do all these other things through Torah, right? And not just to be great in Torah, right? But the other things involved. So therefore, what happened? A person's going to say, come on, if he's holding the baby, what are his thoughts going to have an effect on the child, right? Most people are going to say, come on, there's no telepathy. There's no mental telepathy over here. The kid's a baby. It's never going to affect him in any way, shape, or form. So what happens? Over time, he grows up and he starts reading things that take him away from Judaism, right?
Oh.
He starts reading books, secular books, heretical books, different things, and that leads him down the path, right? The final straw for Elisha ben Abuya is the Talmud we quoted when he sees the son go do the will of his father or not by shooing away the mother bird. That's the final straw. And that's when he becomes a heretic. Now, he doesn't become a heretic overnight. That is exactly the point. Because the poison already entered from when he was born. The only question is, how long is it going to take to manifest itself? Right? That poison is there. So therefore, no one in their right mind, in general, is going to choose a secular person to hold the baby. Doesn't matter how great the honor is. Doesn't matter they're the great-great-grandfather. Whatever. If they desecrate Shabbos, you don't want any of their thoughts, whatever they are, going into the child in a negative way. Right? They may not be thinking anything. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's like putting the child on an altar. If you're putting him on an altar of idolatry, well, guess what's going to happen to that kid eventually? Somewhere down the line, something is going to happen in a negative way. And how did it start? How did the negative way start? It started with the holding of the baby. So someone's going to say, come on, that's superstition. That doesn't really exist. There's no such thing as mental telepathy. Maybe there isn't, right? Maybe there is. It doesn't matter. But isn't the Talmud itself, right? Without getting a whole theoretical discussion, isn't the Talmud itself written word of God? Don't we believe what the Midrashim say? Something's okay. We're not going to necessarily take it face value, right? Some things are exaggerations, right? Certain things you have to know when to take things at face value, when not to, right, etc. But everybody brings down from this source how important it is in educating kids from the very beginning. In other words, you have to nip it in the bud what influences there are. Now, it's not always possible to do that. You don't want your house to look like a cesspool, right? Even though everyone, a lot of people got smartphones and they have computers and all this. There's a lot of garbage out there. Also, very easy to fall in traps. Very, very easy, right? Some people have it easier, some people not. Some people not really tempted by this stuff. but it's a tremendous evil inclination today. I don't think there's any question. They're going to say, but a person has to chill, they have to relax. So what if they watch something, this, that? The more a person's involved, everybody will tell you in education, the worse off it is for the kid. Why? Because they don't interact with others. They just text them, right? Imagine you're sitting at the table and you text somebody, can you pass the salt? You're not even talking, right? Don't forget how to talk, right? We got these word processors. People don't know how to, people aren't good at grammar. People aren't good at spelling because everything's done for you. Right?
The round clock, Rabbi. The round clock. How many kids can't read the dial? They need a digital clock.
There's a lot of good stuff out there. There are a lot of good things. There is a lot of good things that help, right? But the problem is you're not using your own brain, right? Like you write something and all of a sudden, there'll be a red thing all over it saying fragment, fix this, whatever, but you don't realize anything wrong with it because your grammar is like a 5th grade level, right? Because you've relied on a word processor, right? You have to learn it yourself, but it's been made very, very easy today that we become stupider over the generation. Why?
Dependent.
Because with the invent of technology and how fast, technology has evolved,
right.
what's happened is that we haven't evolved our brains. We're relying on other people, or other things. We don't want to think for ourselves, right? We want everything. We want to be spoon-fed, right? Which is what really education is, just spitting back information, right? But you're not really taught how to think.
Right.
Anyone who's ever learned Talmud, you've learned it in depth. No offense, going to university is a joke. It's a joke, because you're taught how to think. You're taught how to wrap your brain around subtle differences of opinion. You could have 2 commentaries say the exact same thing, except one adds a word or 2 different, and that changes the whole thing. Say, are they arguing? They're not arguing. They have to learn how to analyze. Right? In the secular world, by certain things, you also have to do that. Right? I'm not saying not, but you're not taught how to think. Right? One of my rabbis, a genius in so many different things, and he helped invent plastic bottles. Right? Way back when. And he sat with like some of the greatest minds, greatest science minds, and they couldn't sit. Some of these people couldn't sit for more than 20 minutes, half an hour, trying to work things out. Different formulas, different this, different that. I don't know. I'm not going to say they were ADHD. They had ants in the pants or whatever. They just couldn't fully concentrate for X amount of time. Now, anyone, who's ever sat and learned, you learn for hours. You could be learning the same text for hours. Back and forth, this commentary, that commentary, Jewish law, all kinds of different things, right? Your mind has to be there, right? Your mind cannot wander. Right, because your mind wanders. You miss something over here, so you have to concentrate. You have to pay attention. You have to see. Okay, Talmud said this. Commentary says this. Well, what are they telling you? What are they commenting on? You got to take a step back. How are they putting it in context? But another commentary doesn't say that. Goes a different way. What are they arguing about? Etc. You're taught how to analyze. Right. It takes a long time to understand how to do this because kids start learning Mishnah, learning Talmud, 4th grade, 5th grade. They start learning Mishnah already. So you're talking about 10 years old. So they have to learn the jargon, et cetera. You start learning Talmud by the age of, 11 or 12, something like that. But the real learning comes, in their teenage years. That's when the serious learning comes in and how to learn and all that. So by the time they're in their early 20s, they know how to learn already. But it's a painstaking process, right? It's not something where you're going to be spoon-fed. And I was never spoon-fed. I started from the very beginning. So there's always hope for all of us because I was a hotshot coming out of university. Knew how to read Hebrew, didn't understand a word. It's kind of like the Frisco Kid. You ever saw the Frisco Kid with the Indian chief? He said, I read the Holy Torah. I didn't understand a single word, right? So it's like, okay, Coffman, read the Mishnah. I was like, no, I'll take the 0. They're like, read it and explain it, right? So we had to learn it without commentary at the very beginning. And that was very humbling, like what it's talking about. Sure. And it's a lot easier if you're learning with commentary, see what's going on. But we had to learn how to think. They wanted to train us how to think, right? Not most places do that. They do it a different way. But when, after a while, you look at a Mishnah, you're asking all the right questions, right? Because I say, okay, you could have said it like this, maybe said it like that, other things, but you're sitting there using your brain, right? You're not getting spoon-fed over here. Most of the world is spoon-fed, right? And, again,
shovel after shovel.
That's what it is. A person's a doctor, person's a lawyer, okay, they're not, science and medicine may have changed a little bit over the years, right? Being a lawyer, most things don't change. Maybe a few lawsuits here or there, right? But, what they're doing is more or less the same, right? So they say, well, Torah's the same thing, right? There's Torah involved. So in every generation, the rabbis have the right to interpret, right? But there are certain things, where the Torah doesn't change, where they say, what about electricity on Shabbos? They say, is that kindling a fire? It's like, oh, the rabbi's changing the Torah. No, does it fit the criteria? So if I turn on the switch, I'm not doing anything. I'm not changing anything. So what's my obvious answer to that? Take off the plastic to the circuit. Take a here you go. You got a screwdriver. Stick it in the socket. He said, I would never do that. So why not? I said, it doesn't do anything. So I'm gonna get electrocuted. Oh, you're gonna get electrocuted. Why are you gonna get electrocuted? Because there's a circuit. Oh, really? There's a circuit. So I turn it on and turn it off.
Live wire.
Am I doing anything? I'm doing something. Question is what category it comes under. It doesn't matter, right? But the rabbis forbade it, right? That's not changing things over here, right? You have to understand, you have to understand where it comes from. Doesn't apply. Doesn't apply. There are a lot of different things that have changed, over the last 50, 60 years or more.
A light bulb.
Hundreds of years, things have changed.
Yeah.
Right? Things have changed. The Talmud doesn't change. Right? The question how we look at certain things and how we analyze doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. There are a lot of things, right? That obviously, in the time of the Talmud didn't, you would say, that does this apply? They wouldn't have known the answer. They know what it was. Right? But now you have certain things. Now you have certain things that, that didn't apply then, but now apply. Right? They certainly apply now. The question is it under a certain category? It's not. Right? Does it do the same thing or not? Right? We have electricity. Right? Say, electricity doesn't do anything. Right? Or gas. Says you're not allowed to kindle a fire. Right? On Shabbos. So they say, what if I put on gas? Or heat? Right? I have an electric stove. So it's not the same thing. Really? Stick your nose to it. Let it go on for about 10 minutes. Stick your nose to it. You'll burn off the face the face of your nose or your whole face. Oh, that's hot, isn't it? It's not exactly fire, but doesn't it work the same way? Right? A microwave might be different, right? It's a microwave. It doesn't necessarily work the exact same way, but it does a similar thing, right? Then you get electronics, other things. So you're going to say, well, that's changing the Torah. It's not changing the Torah. The question is, does it apply? Right? Does it apply over here? So, you have to see the bigger picture. We have to realize as well, which again, I just opened sort of a can of worms over here, in that sense that when you see by Elisha ben Abuya, that the beginning, that his beginning started off on the wrong foot. Right? No pun intended. It started off on the wrong foot because of what his father thought at the time. So people say, like, well, what's the big deal? So it comes on Talmud and says it is a big deal. Right? And not only is it a big deal, but, essentially when something is started on the wrong foot, it can manifest itself in a tremendous negative way. Now, does that mean a person can't overcome it? No. It doesn't mean that. Now, you take the end of his life, Elisha ben Abuya died, there was a pillar of fire over his grave, the Talmud says. There was a pillar of fire. Now, what happened? Talmud says he couldn't go into paradise because of all his transgressions. Right? At the same time, he had tremendous merit, and he couldn't go into Gehenna, right? Into hell as well. So he sort of stuck. Comes along Rabbi Meir, his student Rabbi Meir said, I'm going to get him out of this. I'm going to take him and I'm going to take him to Gan Eden. When I die, I'll do that. So when Rabbi Meir died, the pillar of fire stopped. Right? So, what do we derive from here? We derive one very simple thing, and that is whatever we see, whatever we come in contact with, we have to be careful. Technology is a double-edged sword. It can help us in many, many things, right? Many, many things, no question about it. It can also destroy people. People get addicted to sports. They get addicted to, the news. They get addicted to things they shouldn't see, right? There are a million things that a person can easily get addicted to, and especially if everything is quote unquote taboo. A person, sees a few things here and there, they can get sucked in, right? It's very, very, very easy to get sucked in. So what do? You nip it in the bud, right? But a lot of people have access. It's unfortunate, in many ways it can have a tremendously negative effect, right? So the question is, what do you want your house to look like? You want to bring all the outside in, and a person's going to say, well, I need it for work anyways, but yeah, the question is what your kids see, right? And how it affects them. There people just go haywire. Yeah, even with games, right? I grew up way back when, right? What was the big game that come up when I was growing up? It was Donkey Kong, right? That was the first. I mean, that was whatever. You had Atari, you had television, you had
Space Invaders.
You had Pong. I mean, that was like, come on, But once Donkey Kong and these other things came out, that was like an unbelievable
8-bit.
That was like an unbelievable thing, but very, very easy, very, very easy. To get addicted. Not only get addicted to that, but what do people like to go to? The video
arcades. Yeah,
right. It's a lot of fun. Okay, it's a waste of money, but a person just gets into things. They have fun. Forget about the influence and everything else. It's addicting, right? These things, they make it like that, right? Now you don't have to go to an arcade. You just get it on your computer, right? Just download a game, get all these different realistic type of games. It's also when I was growing up, I was never into this. But, kids growing up, when I was growing up, we're into Dungeons and Dragons, right? So I was never, into that, this role playing, this other thing. I was never really into that. But also, right, similar to that. But, board games, okay, they were fun. They weren't, I wouldn't necessarily say they were addicted per se. Video games, and someone asked me once, that
the glowing screen. Yeah.
Listening to a class, a person has ADHD, but even so, listening to a video, their mind can wander, this and that. If I play a video game, I have no problem. I said, of course, right? It makes perfect sense. I said, why? Because you're putting the garbage straight in your head. You're going straight into the jugular of your evil inclination and feeding it. Right. So the more you play it, the more you want to be better. The more you want to be better, of course you want to play it. You want to keep playing it because it's addicting. Right? You want to be the best. It's normal. It's natural. Right? Totally against Torah. Because what ends up happening is these things are very interesting. These things are very exciting. I'm not gonna say not. These things are tremendously exciting. Right? If they're tremendously exciting, how much fun is it to learn Torah? Right? That's the problem. You're not seeing videos. You're not having images thrown at you. So therefore, it's a lot more fun doing other things that go against the ability to sit and learn, because then your mind wanders. Then one of my son-in-laws told me that if he's learning with someone, he can tell. I mean, he's very sharp as it is, but he can tell if somebody's learning with watched something like the night before. Why? Because he can tell by where they're holding, by where, just where their mind is, at the time. It has an effect. We don't, what do movies do? A person just sits there and watches the couch potato. Doesn't use their brain, right? The less.
CFL.
The less, right? Even the CFL, right? The less you use your brain, right? The more it can atrophy. I saw a study. I didn't see the study. I saw someone commented on a study many, many years ago, where the claim was that if you let the brain atrophy, you watch too much TV, sports, entertainment, whatever it is, you don't use your brain intellectually, then they wanted to show that it can cause dementia and Alzheimer's. Ooh. Right? Because you don't use the brain. Right? We only maximize, I think, 3%. 3% of the brain. Right? But if a person just wastes their brain, again, I'm not saying this is proven 100%. You can take it with a grain of salt. But this is many years ago. This study was done that shows that the more in contact you have with these things, over time atrophies the brain. So say I do crossword puzzles. I do other things stimulate the brain. All right, whatever. But the more a person watches these things, the more the brain atrophies. Right? If a person uses it, doesn't mean you can't get Alzheimer's later. If a person just constantly learns all the time, I'm not saying that. Right? Definitely not saying that. But I would think you have less of a chance because you're keeping the brain strong. Right? You're keeping the brain power in because it's always working. Right? So, not to mention all the other stuff that comes with, watching violence and, and moral things and, the effect that it has. And even if a person has done it, you got to work like a dog, get it out of your system, and, imagine trying to sit for long periods of time, your brain wanders. It can happen to the best of us, no question. Right. But if a person's been exposed to so many different things, it's much harder to listen. It's much, because people are not taught to think. I know in some of my classes, some of my conversion classes where there are a lot of details, and I broke up my classes because I don't want people to their brains to fry because it's too much information.
Overload, yeah.
Even with a certain amount of information, some people, it's overkill. They can't take so much information. Why not? Because they've never been trained to do it. They've never been trained to think. They've never been trained to analyze in general, right? If that is the case, learning Torah is not going to be easy, right? It's a discipline in and of itself, right? Medicine, it's all about reactions, right? Medicine is about memorization, right? This works for this works for that. How does the body work? Some of it definitely is trial and error, right? I don't think there's any question. A person comes in with a certain thing, a doctor might not be sure. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that, could have certain things towards this or towards something else. It's not foolproof. They could be wrong, many different things. Person has certain symptoms. It could be the flu, could be corona, it could be, any number of things. They can miss the boat and could cause a person, right? It could cause, it could cause, serious repercussions if they don't get to what it is, right? In other words, someone comes in with certain symptoms, they think it's the flu, they think it's something else, they do these tests all come out negative, etc. Then they do a CAT scan, nothing really comes up. Oh, then like a week later, a few days later, let's say they do a PET scan. They do a PET scan, they say, oh, guess what? You have lymphoma. They finally figure out, they say, oh, this is what it is, right? I can tell you it happened to my father. They had all these different things. They know what it was. They had no idea what it was. Took them, I guess a few weeks to finally, it took about 3 weeks. Really took about 3 weeks when he wasn't feeling well to finally get to what it was, and then once when they did a PET scan, they found it was lymphoma, right? So the doctor said, okay, it seems like it's terminal, right? It's not going to be now, whatever. It took 3 weeks to figure it out, and he died the next day. After all that, and I had all these questions to ask my Rebbe. That was it. It was. They didn't expect all his, internal organs were going to shut down, and that's what happened. But it took them 3 weeks. Took them 3 weeks for them to, to finally get the right prognosis. Now, if they would have got it ahead of time, does that mean they would have come up with the same thing would have happened? I don't know. I don't know what would have happened. I don't know how they would have treated it at the very beginning. In any case, regardless, right? That was supposed to be. That's what happened. And that's it. But, it's not foolproof, right? Nope. Doctors are, not magicians. It could be this, could be that, could be a number of things. Sometimes they get it right in the first time. Okay, right? So sometimes you get able to put two and two together. I've read a number of articles where, they tried this, they tried that, they couldn't, and then something like almost out of nowhere, came up and said, they figure out the problem, right? But, thank God it doesn't get so serious or whatever, but people can suffer from all kinds of different things where they don't know what it is, right? They just don't know what it is.
Yep, trouble.
And it's very hard to treat something if you don't know what it is, right? That's why I say it's not, it's not necessarily foolproof, but in general, people have their specialties, if they have their specialties, they should know, like, pretty much 100% of this, so that there aren't any questions, etc. But again, information doesn't 100% change, right? There are certain things, maybe there's certain, medicines, that come on the market that, help things over the years. And have changed things in different ways. That very well could be, right? So that's a game changer, but the thing itself doesn't necessarily change, right? The disease could get better, could get worse, and how to handle it, but the information, the human body doesn't change, right? Cells don't change. They discover things here, there, but it's not like they're reviewing all medicine every 5 years. They're not reviewing all that information doesn't change, right? Being a lawyer, it's the same thing. Being in most fields, right? Once a person knows it, that's it. Okay, certain innovations here, certain innovations there, right? It doesn't necessarily change. So, so once they got the information, that's one thing, but the information, no offense, is not rocket science. Right. In other words, the factors themselves make, they certainly can't be logical, etc. But you're not necessarily taught to think out of the box. You're not necessarily taught how to analyze. You're just given information, right? You're given information. So good, by a lawyer, you have to know how to apply it. You have to know what cases should apply, not apply, precedents, right? Similar to Talmud in some ways. Right, but you have to know where it goes. Almost other disciplines in general, you're not going to have that. Especially in stuff that you use your hands for. Medicine and construction. These type of things. Things have changed here and there, right? But the vast majority of things are the same. So it's not about using your brain, right? As we mentioned by the Chovos Levavos, it's either God's going to give you livelihood either through brains or brawn. Right? If you weren't given brains, you'll be given brawn. If you're not given brawn, you'll be given brains. Right? So that's that's the idea by Elisha ben Abuya, that we got to be careful what we see. We got to be careful what we read. We got to be careful what we bring in the house. We have to be constantly using our brains, even in downtime. So you learn something lighter. You're in Musar, you're in ethics, you're a little bit Jewish philosophy, Jewish history. There's a lot of information, a person can take in. We're just creatures of habit. We like information. We don't want to miss the news, want to hear what's going on. God forbid, I might miss a war or something, right? But, it goes crazy.
But I find we need time to digest. Yeah. We got to digest a little, right? Don't we have to actually internalize it some way?
To a certain extent, I just think, I think people use that as an excuse in order to, to give into their, other desires, right? Because if I would ask most people, over the years, tell me like what's going on in the news, right? Well, in the last year it's all about Trump. We're not even going to speak about him, right? And and everything else. Over the last few months, all about the election, this and that. Okay. So, there's collusion, there's not, there's corruption, there's this, fires, internal things in different countries. Does that make us any better? Right? Let's really analyze. If it affects the Jewish people, got to analyze what's going on. All this anti-Semitism, why is it happening? Right? We have to analyze what's going on with us because everything's a sign really for us. But all things being equal, things that don't affect us, in general, right? And we're not supposed to necessarily get a message from it. So then what are we wasting our time for? Right. What in the world are we wasting our time for? So what's someone going to say? It's interesting. It's fun, right? But does that make someone a rabbinic scholar? Does that make someone, knowledgeable about Torah? Right? As a friend of mine would say, I've never met a great rabbi through the internet. I mean, became great through the internet, right? I mean, unless you're Rabbi Dr. Google. It takes a lot of hard work, right? And these other things are very, very good distractions. Unbelievable distractions because we're caught up. We're caught up in all this. We're interested in all this.
Yeah, diversion.
Some more, some less, but the reality is what? The reality is it's a distraction. It's an absolute distraction. I always tell people, with all the knowledge I have about, sports and entertainment, over the years, push away all the great Torah giants. If I would have really focused, could have been just as great as anybody else, right? But we get sidetracked. We absolutely get sidetracked. And being sidetracked, with all these things, no one's going to say it's not fun. Absolutely no one's not going to say it's interesting. How many people are addicted to Candy Crush? See this all the time. I mean, other things. You get into it, you get sucked in. I'm not saying you're going to waste money trying to get more lives or whatever. Depends how sucked in you get. Gambling's still up there, other things. There are a lot of very interesting, lot of fun distractions, right? When people didn't have sports, right, with this pandemic, people going out of their minds. Someone said I was so desperate I watched Korean baseball. I guess it's like watching the CFL. But people were, roller derby.
Golf.
People were so desperate. They were absolutely desperate, right? And I understand, it keeps non-Jews, it keeps them occupied. They're going to stadiums, they're watching it in bars. They're not giving Jews any problems. It's a tremendous thing, right? It's a tremendous thing. Total waste of time. I grew up in it. I can tell you, it's an inclination. It's an evil inclination that if a person's really into it, it's very, very hard. Mm-hmm. Very hard to give up.
Pub room darts.
Yeah, right. Someone, I heard a great rabbi once say, if you live in a certain city, does it really matter if they're successful in sports or not? Your team won, all of a sudden, you're all excited.
On the bandwagon,
it's like everything's good with the world. So it doesn't make sense logically. So what do you mean? Reference for my city. It's good for the city and it brings in money and
Super Bowl coming up.
All these things, right? I would say, okay, so if you're a Tampa Bay fan, you haven't had a championship team in 17 years or more, whatever it is. Have all these losing seasons, right? Bring my quarterback from New England. Okay, so things change, right? Whatever it is. But, everyone's all excited. Again, it's exciting, right? It is exciting. But from a Torah perspective, why should we care?
Yep.
Why in the world should we care?
Yeah.
And the answer is we shouldn't. It doesn't, this rabbi was saying many years ago, doesn't make any rational sense. And if your team loses, you're depressed. No, you don't understand. 6th game, this guy blew it. The ball went through his legs. I can't believe it. What are you getting upset about? Right? It's a game. And the fact that they won or they lost, irrelevant. It's irrelevant. How does that make you a better Jew or a better non-Jew? Right? These people are living the lives I want to imitate. I'm gonna put posters. Gonna hang up posters of them and look how moral they are. Yeah. And look at etc. Why? It doesn't make sense. Logically, it doesn't make sense. Right? But people are into it. Some more, some less. Whatever it is, these things are making millions. Advertising, shirts, fingers, whatever, and making millions. I mean, okay, they're losing money now, but they regroup it eventually. Once things go back to normal. But quote unquote. But in general, as a Jew, why should we care? Right? So a person will say, well, I have to be informed because, I have to know what's going on in the world. Who says? The only thing we need to be concerned about is what we're doing. What we're doing in spiritual terms. That's what we have to be concerned about. If we live in a place where now maybe more dangerous, I take precautions, this, that, okay. Right? But in general, we're not talking about that. We're talking about news that doesn't matter. Right? Not to mention it's all Lashon Hara anyway, most of it. Yeah. Right? So why in the world, WINS, you give us 10 minutes, we'll give you the world. The same news. Right? The same news over and over and over. Right? But there are people that are news junkies. There are people, email junkies. God forbid, I missed an email over here. How can I miss an email? Right? So we get caught up in things that have no relevance to spirituality. Not only do they have no relevance, they take us down. Right? They dull the senses. When we dull the senses, we can't tune into Torah properly. It just makes us lazy. And it makes our brains, maybe like yours, I'm not sure with the CAT scan coming up, right? But it makes our brains turn into mush. That's what it does. Again, I'm not saying it's not interesting. I'm not saying it's not fun. Plenty of people like it. Some don't like it. Whatever, right? But people are still willing, if they could go to movies, they'll pay $10 to see a movie, an action movie, or
Canadian.
Whatever it is. People willing to do it because they just want to give their brains a rest. Because life is just crazy and life is too hard. And all this. Forget about the pandemic. Pandemic is a whole different beast, right? But when things were at their height, sports and entertainment, and you have these Marvel movies making billions of dollars, like it's absolutely insane. I'm not saying not entertaining. Right? But we have to think, right? Non-Jews have to think as well. What am I doing in this world? Right? Am I gonna put is the last epitaph on a person's grave gonna be, look at all the movies he watched. Look at all the sporting events. Look, in 1984, this person, me, saw the Boston Celtics beat LA in the finals. Game 7. Whoa! Unbelievable. What does that do?
Larry Bird was still playing, yes?
What does that do for anything? Nothing. Made me a better person, because I saw it happen. People say, greatest, sports city, greatest this, whatever. We have to realize, right? The point over here is that we have to realize I'm a Jew in training. I'm a non-Jew, wants to keep whatever they have to keep. These things are utter nonsense. Now, can a non-Jew follow them? I'm not saying they can't. By a Jew, it's a different issue, right? Can a non-Jew do that? They could do that. I would say it's a moral imperative. Don't you have anything better to do with your life? It's a moral imperative, not that they're obligated. Because if I'm not obligated, let me enjoy it. I don't have to be a Jew, right? So we don't have to be a Jew. But don't you want to be a spiritual person? Right? Don't you want to keep going in the right direction? Going in this direction, I promise you won't be anything. You won't be anything because you'll be totally distracted. And everyone and their mother has a smartphone. Easily to get distracted by these things. Very, very easily. I see people all the time just walking their hands in their face. This machine in their face.
Bang, trip.
Like that's, they're outside, bumping into things, whatever it is, people are, they're just out there. So someone's going to say, okay, for a non-Jew, they're not going to convert. So let me enjoy. I don't have to be a Jew, right? You're right. You don't have to be a Jew, right? And it could be you get upstairs after 120 years, and you ask God to say, hey, Coffman over here said that's a moral imperative. God's going to say, don't worry about it. You could have done it. You just wasted your time. Right? But the idea is we want to be spiritual people. If we want to go in God's way, right? We want to follow the Torah laws. I always have to ask the question, is this something that benefits me? Is it meaning spiritual? Now, when it comes to sports, that may be a spiritual experience, right? Depending who your sports team is, right? It may be a very spiritual experience, right? At the end of the day, either, we always mention, either I'm going up or I'm going down on the spiritual ladder, right? Is it, if it's good for my soul, I'm going up. If it's bad for my soul, I'm going down. And if I'm going down, I have to offset that. So a person will say, but I've been involved in this stuff for years, right? How in the world can I give up watching action movies? Now, isn't it true? Isn't it true in general that what a person watches can affect them, can have a negative effect, violence on TV? The story's up the gazoo about that.
Oh, yeah.
But, forget about being, being addicted, and all that. The values are all wrong.
Right.
It doesn't matter who they kill, whatever, and how they kill, and either the person deserves to die and he's evil doing the wrong thing and all that. It's fun, it's entertaining. The message is wrong. The message in general is wrong. It's about fantasy. Now, a person living in this world, do they want the real thing or do they want fantasy? And if they want fantasy, realize that fantasy comes at a price. And the price is going to be the more a person, whatever addiction a person has, remember, the more that you feed it, the more it's addictive. Now, I'm not saying, a person's going to cut it out. It's like smoking. Okay, that's addictive because they put nicotine in, right? That's a very hard thing to give up, right? But, you tell someone who's a pretty dedicated sports fan, when one sport's done, another one starts, this, that.
They don't see any harm.
They're not going to give it up cold turkey. They're not going to do it. They won't be able to do it. It's too hard, right? It's too hard. And again, it's not fun. It's not entertaining. What is the benefit? What in the world is the benefit? In spiritual terms. Because let's call a spade a spade. If I really understood what my actions do, and I guess this is really the point. If I really understood what my actions do in this world and in the spiritual world, there'd be no possible way a person would ever get out of bed. Why do I say they would never get out of bed? They would be in utter shock to see how far their actions go, how they get judged, and how it affects not just us, how it affects other people, how it affects spiritual things, right? Let's give an example, right? An example, which I mentioned before, is that I read the book Made in Heaven. Well, I shouldn't say I read it. I read the introduction, book about marriage, Rabbi Coffman, of blessed memory. And Rabbi Coffman there says, this is something that just doesn't affect you, right? This decision of who you're going to marry affects you, affects your wife, your future wife, affects your kids, affects your grandkids, all the way down. I'm like, wow, this is too intense for me. And I shut the book, right? And I didn't get that. I didn't get that far. Why? Because the repercussions, you marry the wrong person, right? God forbid. We are half a soul. Got to marry the right person. If a Jew marries a non-Jew, right? Let's just use this as an example. A Jew is supposed to marry a Jew, right? Two halves of a soul come together. A Jew marries a non-Jew. What happened to that other soul? That other half soul, right? So now God has to change things. Who's that soul going to marry? Because these kids you really shouldn't have, right? These kids are non-Jewish kids if the mother's not Jewish. So now imagine this is one person. So now they didn't have the kids they were supposed to have. So God has to change that. So there are a number of repercussions. This is one person that intermarried, right? Now it can affect hundreds of people. Now, if intermarriage is 60%, 65%, we're talking the matrix. We're absolutely talking the matrix. This is one event. This is one event that a person made the wrong decision. Right? So a person has to realize our decisions have repercussions. If a woman, God forbid, is pregnant and smokes crack, right? The kid will come out deformed, most likely. Is the kid's fault? No. Not the kid's fault. There are repercussions. Right? There are spiritual repercussions. If a woman is with somebody she's not allowed to be with, right? She has a child. That child's called a bastard child. Doesn't mean necessarily out of wedlock, right? It means the child, it's a certain union where that child can only marry someone of that union or a convert, right? Because we're talking about a blemish on the pedigree, right? A convert, okay, their pedigree is already blemished, right? In general, so it can only be by a convert, can't be by a regular Jew, in different ways. Now, is it the problem of the child that is born? No. It's not the problem of the child. There are repercussions. There are physical repercussions. There are spiritual repercussions. Now, that being the case, imagine what a person does, right? Even if a person, God forbid, spoke Lashon Hara against somebody else. Person speaks Lashon Hara against somebody else, and it doesn't affect them, right? It doesn't affect them in business. It doesn't affect them in other things. And even if it's true, that's why it doesn't apply to non-Jews. Even if it's true, I'm not allowed to say it. Right, 100% I'm not allowed to say it. Now that being the case, what's the benefit? What's the benefit of me speaking badly against someone else, or someone speaking badly against someone else? Right? If a person stole, I have something in my hands, right? I have something. I did something. If a person speaks lashon hara against someone else, they don't have anything in their hand. The only thing they have is a person put someone else down to make themselves look better, right? Even if they said the truth, and even if everybody knows about it, I'm still not allowed to repeat it. Because the bottom line is I'm over 30 prohibitions by doing so. And a person who habitually speaks badly against others does not see God's presence in the next world, right? That's where I'm holding the gates of repentance. There are 4 groups of people that do not warrant God's presence in the next world. One of them are people who lie. One of them are people that flatter. Another one, someone who speaks lashon hara. That's where I do a class to myself every week. I really enjoy it. Speaking to myself, put it on my subscription website. That's a plug to that. So that's what we're holding now by lashon hara. But by speaking badly against others, you have nothing in your hand except the fact that I knock somebody down. That is a benefit. That 100% is a benefit. That's not money in your pocket. Mm-hmm. That is not something that is tangible. It just makes you feel better, right? So now, for a non-Jew, right? Well, we'll speak about non-Jews for 1 second. For a non-Jew, does that apply to them? It shouldn't, right? There are a number of things that don't make sense, and the laws of lashon hara shouldn't apply to a non-Jew. But I would say, as a moral imperative, does it benefit a soul of a non-Jew by speaking badly against others? Someone's going to tell me everybody does it. You go to the coffee room, everyone's speaking about everybody else. That's just the way it is. That's the way of the world. Well, you know what? Who gives a hoot about the way of the world? The question is, does it benefit me? Does this make me a better person? Now, some people would say, because I heard this information, I'm a better person. You're an idiot. That's totally not true. Right? It's 100% not true. It's interesting. It's interesting information. You might not be allowed to repeat it. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't benefit. It just spurs the fire. That's what it does. It's like putting another stoke in the fire. Even if it's not going to affect the other person. We don't care if there are no far-reaching repercussions. I mean, if there are far-reaching repercussions, the rabbi gets up to speak, people complain about how he speaks, whatever, and it could make him look bad, in his congregation or whatever, and he may lose his job. Yeah, that's a definite, something that come out of it. That's for sure. But even if someone says nothing bad's going to come out of it, no one's going to know about it, never going to speak about it, all these different things, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's just like watching the Super Bowl. 250 million people going to sit there and watch this stupid game the whole day. Right? The whole day. It's a Super Bowl day. The pregame show. Yeah, everyone's going to come up. Well,
pregame show.
Today. Everyone's going to have food. It's all, all things being equal, if it wouldn't be, COVID right now, you'd have a Super Bowl party. Everybody does it, right? Most people do it. It's the most watched game outside the World Cup, right? That's why commercials are so expensive, right? It's an unbelievable thing. Total waste of time. Who cares? Who cares? Your team's in it. They've won it a number of times. Does that make me a better Jew or Jew wannabe or non-Jew? But again, the argument is, I need downtime. This is fun. This is what I enjoy. Think about it. How long does the game last? Game starts what? 6:30? Right? 6:30 at night, usually, in the States. And once it get over, by midnight, at least, it's like 3.5, 4 hours. Got the halftime show. You get all these, you get all these different things, going on. So it's a 3.5 hour or more. I'm going to say it's a lot more. Total waste of time. Get together with friends and you're eating. I can't even imagine you're not speaking badly against others, right? Everyone's getting together, of course, right? That, it's a single watch game besides the World Cup, right? Everybody's watching it. Now, people say you're out of your mind. Can all these millions of people be wrong? They're brain dead. No offense. They're all brain dead. They have nothing better to do.
Cognitive dissonance.
It's a Sunday. What am I going to do? Okay, maybe the Celtics play the Lakers, right? Normally they play the Lakers, on Super Bowl Sunday. You have other things, even if you couldn't watch it. So you watch another sport, you do other things. You won't get together with everybody, but at the end of the day, the whole point the whole point, we have to see we're living in this world. The Messiah is right around the corner, right? It's about building ourselves up spiritually, or God forbid, being swallowed up in an abyss. Right. And we have, 13 million Jews out there going to be swallowed up in an abyss if they don't repent. And most of the non-Jews, if they're in idolatry, also going to get swallowed up, right? What are we going to do? Are we going to learn something from this pandemic? Or are we going to say, well, we're still in lockdown. Thank God for Netflix. Thank God for HBO Max. Thank God for Primo, right? All these different things. And people are going to say, well, it's so easy for you. No, it's not, right? I grew up with this stuff. It's not like, I became an Orthodox Jew and it went out the window, right? Some things are better, some things not. I'm not going to, brag or tell my own horror stories, right? But in general, the point is, it's something that's addictive. It's something that does not benefit ourselves. Not only that, we can get bad things. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, a number of years ago, Charles Barkley, right? I remember, famous basketball players on TNT, right? Still commentary, I think, on TNT. One game, he went to spit on someone said something or whatever, he spit on a 4-year-old. I want to sit here and listen to, forget what they say. Most of the stuff they say is just garbage. It's lashon hara, right? They'll speak badly against others.
Cliche.
At the drop of a hat, right? But people like to hear them speak. People like to watch them play. People are animals. That's what they are. They don't have Torah in their life. They don't have anything in their lives. So they speak, they do, whatever. Why in the world should we emulate them? Why should we even pay to go see them? Because it's fun. It's fun. It's entertaining, right?
Like wrestling.
No one can say otherwise, but the point is we want to be the best we can be in spiritual terms. These things we should just get rid of. And not easy. Yeah, you had a question before.
Well, I wanted to just ask you, back it up a little bit. I know it's not in with this Mishnah, but you had made a comment, about the difficulty, I think you said, with flattery, with
right.
And where's that line between kind and flattery? I mean, I'm trying to broadcast and help share Torah through the rabbis with Noahides. And, sometimes getting to know many rabbis, I'll say comments that I think are not to be flatterous, but honest, sincere, appreciation. And you can tell they've taken it, as if I puffed them up or something.
It depends how a person takes it, right? Because they don't want it to go to their head. We're talking about flattery that Rabbeinu Yonah says in Shari Tshuva, in the Gates of Repentance. He says, we're talking about evil people here. Flattering someone you're not allowed to flatter, right? In other words, you're not allowed to flatter someone even not in front of them. But the sin of flattering an evil person, even in front of them, is a very severe prohibition. Very severe prohibition. So what about someone, I don't know, someone who can help them, someone who's a colleague, someone who's a boss, this, that. They are not, let's just say, the most righteous of the righteous. Right? So, the person, this person's so great. This person's so unbelievable. And all the great things that he does, and all that. Even if they do good things, an evil person doesn't matter. You're not allowed to flatter them. If it's a righteous person, now, a righteous person has to be careful because even if someone flatters them, they have to remember they're still, an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. They have to realize who they are and, don't think they're so great, and all that. People do like to get complimented. I think that's true, but they have to realize where they are. They have to realize where they're holding. Complimenting someone who's righteous, etc. That's not a prohibition, right? That is, that's showing appreciation, right? That's showing what we call hakaras hatov. Hakaras hatov means you're showing goodness, appreciation. Really, you're showing appreciation, for someone else, for what someone else does. But if you appreciate the wrong person, if you appreciate someone, who desecrates Torah, Even if they say good things, even if they are quote-unquote rabbis, right, so to speak, right, that's a problem. Even if it's not in front of them. All the more so, in front of them. I know some people that, not personally, but, that are very big, people go to them for advice in Jewish education, and they're looked up to, so to speak. I wouldn't want them in my house. I just think that, some people just are scum of the earth. I don't care what quote unquote credentials they have. I'll just use one example. You take somebody that, as a motivational speaker wants to bring in a missionary. Right now, it might not be a top 10 tier missionary, but he wants to bring him as a motivational speaker. And they're going to pay him $50,000. I would have done it for 10. Right? I would have done it for 10. But okay, couldn't find a Jewish speaker.
Maybe 5 if you were in it.
And whatever. A lot of people complain, and this non-Jewish speaker backed down. The rabbi didn't back down. This non-Jewish speaker backed down because he didn't want to get involved in such a thing. And, this quote-unquote rabbi said, oh, what a desecration of God's name. And how can they do that? And he wasn't going to missionize anyway. I wouldn't let him speak out my language. Came to my synagogue, this not top 10 tier, missionary. I wouldn't let him speak out of a toilet. I wouldn't let him speak out of a toilet. Why not? What do you think? The guy's not going to give out his card to people? What do you think? People are so weak. People are so weak that they're going to, he's not coming to missionize. Even if you're not coming to missionize, you don't give someone a soapbox, right? So this person said, what a desecration of God's name. These people are fanatics. The person didn't back down. Absolutely didn't back down, right? But this speaker backed down, right? He didn't want to be involved in such a thing, right? I'll take it one step further. This person brought, I don't know where they spoke, hopefully not in the synagogue itself, right? Or just in a room, not in the sanctuary, whatever. Brought in Dr. Ruth. You know who Dr. Ruth is? Right? Anyone knows Dr. Ruth? She's a sex therapist. When are you bringing a sex therapist into a synagogue? For goodness sake, I don't even know how much they paid her. Right? I'm not going to get gross over here. Why in the world would you bring in a sex therapist? Why? What's she going to speak about? Politics? She's going to speak about Trump. No, I don't think so. What do you think she's going to speak about? In a mixed crowd? That's what you're going to have? Yeah. In an Orthodox synagogue? No offense. This person's a lunatic. You go, oh, that's Lashon Hara. How can you speak about it? It's 100% permissible. This guy's a lunatic. He's a lunatic to do such a thing. Right? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make logical sense. Right? That 100% is not Lashon Hara because a person like that, people have to be warned. Like, oh, this is a real Orthodox rabbi. No, he's not. Now, I don't care what rabbinic ordination, a person has. If I were to take a survey, let's take a survey, right, in general. You can find me on Facebook, Beyond Orthodox Judaism, Conversion to Judaism. You can send me a text. Anybody can send me a text. This is the following question. Should an Orthodox rabbi of a synagogue bring in a sex therapist to speak? I don't care what she's speaking about. Right? Obviously, whatever. I don't care what she's speaking about. Should she be allowed to come and speak in the synagogue? To me, this is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. The answer is no. This top 10, not top 10 tier missionary. You let him come, forget about how much you're going to pay him. You let him come as a motivational speaker? How can a person do that? Yeah, you want to draw people, I get it. You want to bring Barbara Walters? Maybe. Have her interview somebody. I know a synagogue that did that. Okay, that's not as bad.
I don't know.
That's not as bad, so to speak, but it wasn't an Orthodox synagogue. Okay. You want to get a lot of people to come. How could a person justify bringing in a sex therapist to a synagogue to speak? In an Orthodox synagogue. If it's Reformer, conservative, progressive, whatever you want to call it, liberal, whatever you want to call it, I have no issues. Because they're not holding anywhere. It's an irrelevant issue. So they'll bring someone in. They'll bring a gay to speak. They'll bring someone else to speak. What difference does it make? They're not holding by Torah mitzvahs. But he wanted to tell me a synagogue is holding by Torah mitzvahs. And people come and learn, and they come and pray, quote unquote, they call themselves Orthodox. How can this bozo bring someone in to speak like that? Either one of them, doesn't matter. Doesn't make any sense, right? Now, someone can say, well, they're not going to speak about that, so I should let them come. Why should I let them come in general? Why in the world? Why in the world? Because of what they represent. That's the point, is what they represent. I could also say, I would bring in certain speakers that, they have other issues, immoral issues. I'll give an example. You're going to bring a football player come speak. Or to give inspirational talk. Yeah, and what happened? This guy got caught clocking his girlfriend, a few years ago. Got clocked on the camera, right? Clocking his girlfriend. You want to bring someone like that to speak?
No ethics.
No ethics. Why? I can understand why you might think that it's not such a bad thing, whatever, right? But you can't. The point here is you cannot separate what a person does from how he lives his life. Aristotle, famous story. Aristotle was known to be a tremendous womanizer. They caught him in the act, and he said, there's Aristotle, the philosopher. Aristotle does other things. Within Judaism, that does not fly. Right? Now, does that mean we don't make mistakes? We make mistakes. Right? You mentioned that before. We're human. We make mistakes. But there are certain things, certain mistakes, there's like almost no law of return here. Depends what a person does. Right? Person can make mistakes, do certain things. Okay, it affects them, doesn't necessarily affect other people. They can make serious mistakes. But see, what do we say at the beginning? See, you never know where this information comes, and we come back to the same Mishnah. Look at this, right? You go back to the beginning. Do not separate yourself from the community. Now, we mentioned that if you are the head of the community, right? We mentioned that if someone comes as appointed as the leader of the community, right? Even if it's not fitting to mix with others in general, you don't separate, meaning, what's the job of a rabbi in general, right? Let's speak about that while we're going to wind up here. He's a teacher, right? He's supposed to teach. He's supposed to live by example, right? My Rebbe always says, if you're a rabbi of a synagogue and they're not trying to drive you out of town, you're not doing your job right.
Yep, I heard that.
You're not doing your job right? So the point is, you have to tell them, keeping Shabbat, if you don't keep Shabbos, there's punishment. If you don't do this, there's punishment. There's the world we live in. There are things we have to do. There are obligations. There are repercussions, and, we have to live with it. He has to be there to inspire. He has to lift them up, try and lift them up to a higher level. But in my language, he can't be a wuss. He's got to tell them what they need, even what they don't need to hear. Even if they're big donors, sometimes he's got to say, listen, certain things, that you're doing are, problematic or whatever. And, you may lose some people, right? But there are certain things you cannot stand by the sideline, right? There's, my Rebbe went to South Africa.
Ethics, you got to have a line, yeah.
All kinds of problems there because of basic things that were wrong. I'll give one example. They were burying, in South Africa, they were burying non-religious Jews with Jews that kept Shabbos. Now that you're not allowed to do because we have a Talmudic statement that someone who is liable for death penalty, let's say by stoning, didn't keep Shabbos. You don't bury him with someone who, let's say, committed adultery because that's by throwing molten lead down your throat, right? There are two different punishments, but they're not buried in the same area because one's a more stringent punishment, one is a less stringent punishment, right? It's still capital punishment. Right. So in other words, someone who has a less, has a less stringent punishment, buried next to someone with a more stringent punishment. What do we see over here? Someone didn't keep Shabbos, and he's buried next to someone who kept Shabbos. Right. So he gets upstairs after 20 years. God says, "Hey, how come you didn't keep Shabbos?" So what do you mean? I lived in South Africa. Nobody kept Shabbos. Very few people kept Shabbos. What's God going to say? He said, "Hey, look at the buddy next to you." So he looks over. I don't know how he does this exactly, but he looks over and he sees the person buried next to him was an Orthodox Jew. So God's going to say, what do you mean? You're buried next to this guy, right? Or whoever it is that kept Shabbos. You don't have a complaint you didn't keep Shabbos because someone in your own community kept Shabbos. Someone who lives there kept Shabbos. So that's a tremendous claim. Tremendous claim that a person get upstairs that they're in trouble. They are definitely in trouble. So my Rebbe, try to stop a funeral, burying someone who was, didn't keep Shabbos, next to people that did keep Shabbos. He explained, and he tried to speak to the head of the Hever Kadisha of the burial society. The head of the Hever Kadisha wasn't religious, and whatever. So I'm trying to help you. They slaughtered him in the press. They slaughtered him on TV. He had to make a special in the synagogue. He had to make a whole special meeting in the synagogue in order, to explain to people like what was going on. So what did the press say? He hates people. He hates secular people when they're alive. He hates them worse when they're dead. Right? But he said, I'm trying to help you. Eventually, he changed it. Right? Eventually, he changed it. But, there were people there wanting to make absolute mincemeat out of him because it didn't fit their world outlook. Well, who cares about their world outlook? The point is that it's a tremendous danger spiritually for the person to be buried there. Because God's going to hold them up to a higher standard. God's going to say, what do you mean you didn't keep? This guy kept over here. Right? What's your excuse? So, it's not about telling people what they need, what they don't want to hear. Right? They don't want to hear it. There's a lot of things people don't want to hear. Oh. Right? No one wants to hear rebuke, all that. But, at the end of the day, it's to their benefit. Right? It makes them better. Right? It will make them better. It might be hard for them to hear it, true. Right? But, a person has to realize you can't sugarcoat. I'm not saying it always has to be fire and brimstone, right? But, people have to live inspired. They have to realize, that we don't know how long we're here in this world. David says 70 years, we have strength, 80 years. We don't know how long we're here for.
That's right.
Since we don't know how long we're here for, you got to make the best out of it right now. Because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Be alive.
Right? So you got to live, you got to live to the best of your ability. Can't worry about what other people say. Right. And the real bottom line is you cannot get taken over by what's going on in society. We're supposed to separate from society, right? Jewish people are the chosen nation. Non-Jews are supposed to attach themselves, to us. And even though it's really, really hard, not to give in to these vices. And again, it doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. All this stuff, I guess, even for, those people like the CFL, it can be enjoyable, I guess. I don't know. I'm not that desperate. But, regardless of that, you still have to ask the question. And, this would be a resounding no. Am I better after watching the CFL or not? Answer is no. Right? That's probably for sure. You get a goose egg for that. But that's what we have to ask ourselves. And we want to become better people. We want to live inspired. Living inspired means not getting caught up in the muck, right? Not getting caught up in politics. Not getting, like my Rebbe said to me once, many years ago, I was very much in Israeli politics. My Rebbe said, listen, 95% of the time, if you're happy the way God runs the world, the other 5%, you're probably never going to understand in 10 lifetimes. So it doesn't matter. You follow this and you follow that and you analyze, what difference does it make? Your obligation, he said to me, your obligation is to sit and learn. Don't get distracted. Yeah. He said, if you get distracted, it's over. Because then you don't think as well, you don't learn as well, and you're not focused. Now, I'm not going to say I don't practice what I preach. I definitely, to the best of my ability, practice.
Oh, you got more grandkids.
Doesn't mean I don't sneak and see, score here, score there, other things, right? Give it up, give something up. A person, it's been ingrained in them since they were much younger. It's very, very hard to give up. Very, very hard. So if a person even does it in moderation, right? Let's say, without getting totally sucked in. Is it better than getting sucked in? Yeah. Is it still bad for you? Oh, there's no question. There's no question. See, but the evil inclination makes it so sweet. right? Just makes it so so enjoyable. And how could you not watch? Yeah, question.
Well, just more a statement. A couple weekends ago, when we had our last class, earlier, just prior to that class that week, I got a call from my mother, who's in Southern Ontario, near Toronto area, right? Point being, she was flying to British Columbia here to Vancouver area to see. She was going to stay at my sister's for 2 weeks. And I didn't have enough notice, right? And I mean, that's like 4 hours away from me, and I didn't have enough notice. And I had plans, and the only way I could have actually got free to go see her would be to cancel my broadcast that weekend. And I thought, I know that there's flight restrictions somewhat, and I know that, family matters, and I love my mother to death and all this, and I says, I didn't want to give it up for the Torah lessons, right? And the people out there that need to hear Torah, that just believe and hope and pray that the messages are getting through. I know that the rabbis had already prepared, and if I cancel, just sit out of the blue, I really felt just like you're saying. I really felt I'd be getting distracted and drawn away. And it's not that I don't care or don't want to be there, because I would have ended up down there having a good time, falling into a rut that
while we're ending, I'll just say that there can be that Rebbe brought down this week's parsha. He talked about Rabbi Elijah Vilna, the Vilna Gaon, and he used to have the Magna Dubna come, the Dubna Magid come and give Musar. He said, "Oh, you're so righteous. You don't go anywhere. You're not out there with the masses. Working on your evil inclination. What good are you? You're just sitting learning at home." And the Vilna Gaon answered. He said, "You might have a point. You might actually, have a point, but who says I have to bring an evil inclination on myself in order to make me better?" Right? In other words, why do I have to be out there, tempt myself, overcome it, whatever? Why do I have to do that? He said, but don't think, even if I'm learning, by myself in my own room, doesn't mean I don't have an evil inclination here either. Right? In other words, the person's even learning in the base medrash, right? Learning in the study hall when it's permissible. Etc. And, you think people don't necessarily get distracted, speak about politics? Maybe, right? Maybe part of the learning, speak about that. Maybe speak about other things, right? We're going to see if a person says, wow, what a beautiful tree in the middle of learning, they're liable for a death penalty. Imagine if you're speaking in learning, right? We'll speak about that probably in the next millennia. But imagine if a person, is learning Torah and in the middle, they tell a story about the football game last week or the other day, or they tell something about Trump, or they speak 10 minutes. They waste time. They speak 10 minutes. They waste time. Say, okay, not the end of the world. They're learning for 4 hours, 4.5 hours, whatever. 10 minutes, not the end of the world. Well, it depends on the person's level. Wasting time when you could have been learning is pretty severe, right? It's pretty severe. Is it possible even within a study hall to get distracted? 100%. 100%. Just because you're in a study hall doesn't mean you don't get distracted. Forget about, I'm not saying being tired, putting your head down, to rest a little bit. Right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where a person, says things or they find out something where there's an act of loving kindness needs to be done, and the person thinks I'm the only one who can do it. They shut their book and they go. Right? There is an evil inclination. There is an evil inclination in the study hall as well. So when a person, the point being is that when a person learns, wherever they're learning, right, you just got to shut off the world. Totally shut off the world. You got to focus on what you're doing. It doesn't matter how much time you're learning. It could be 10 minutes, it could be an hour, it could be 20 minutes. You cannot get distracted. We're living in a totally distractive world. God put us in this world to gain, right? You have to remember one other thing. The other thing is we're taking rubies and diamonds with us in the next world. The rubies and diamonds are mitzvahs, right? Are learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. Those are the rubies and diamonds. So you can say, well, I learn most of the time. Okay, so sometimes I say things, whatever, I get distracted and we talk about other things, this, that. If it's a bad distraction, you're going to pay a price. You're certainly going to pay a price, but imagine that, let's say it's even for 10 minutes. If a person can say 200 words a minute, right, they just lost 20,000 mitzvahs right there. Right there, 20 minutes more, 40,000 mitzvahs. right? In one shot. In one shot. But a person doesn't see it that way. You get caught up in the moment, or you just try, someone says something and you say, okay, no, I don't want to get distracted, or, whatever. You got to stay focused. And the evil inclination does not leave you alone. You do not. You have to fight with everything you have. And then the evil inclination will come in a different way. And it'll come this way. And it'll come that way. And, it doesn't end. It never ends. Right? But the bottom line is I can't get distracted. And this is the world of distraction. Many, many different things. Right? Like many things we brought up earlier. So,
right.
We have our work cut out for us. No one's born righteous over anyone listening, came from the same world, that I did. I came from that same world. Is it easy to get distracted? I'm telling you, it's easy. It's, even if I've been learning for 25 years, 30 years, whatever it is, and I know the ins and outs and what you should do and shouldn't do, whatever, are we holding by everything we should do it every second? I would hope to say yes. I'm not going to say yes. Right? Because the bottom line is, as we said many times, we get distracted. And we got to work hard not to do that. And we have to have a game plan. And if I get distracted today, God forbid, you work on it tomorrow. You work on it the next day. You try and figure out what happened or whatever. Because, again, you're losing diamonds. When a person gets upstairs, God shows you all the diamonds you lost. You're going to kick your spiritual self, and there's nothing you can do about it. You lost it. Mm-hmm. You 100% lost it, and you can't get it back.
That's right.
And you say, God, give me another chance. Too late, most likely. You're not coming back to this world, most likely.
Squandered.
So imagine, I mentioned, 20 minutes. God forbid, a person was learning, and they got distracted, whatever. 40, 50, 100,000 mitzvahs out the window. 100% out the window. You don't get it back.
No.
You can't.
Rabbi, I don't want to distract you. I got to wind it down here in less than a minute. Any final word?
So my final word is that you don't want to get upstairs and realize that I could have done this, I could have done that, and now I have very little to show. Right? If you take anything away from this is to, when a person learns, when you're doing things in this world, A, you want to be prepared. B, you don't want to get distracted, and you want to work hard to always stay focused. And that 100%, I agree, because I've lived it, continue to live with it. It's not an easy thing to do. But we have to realize on the flip side what we could end up losing. And that embarrassment is one of the aspects of what hell is in the next world when a person gets totally embarrassed like that and you realize what you could have done and you didn't do it, that suffering, not going to be eternal, right? But that suffering, is going to help in fixing up the soul.
Wow. Huge, deep thought there. I look forward to hearing more on this, because I've seen so many people with a finish line mentality as if, okay, and then I'm there and I've achieved it and I'm done, as if there's not more to always be doing, as if it doesn't continue. And I think what you're talking about is just profound. Thank you for clarifying it in a way such as dropping diamonds, dropping rubies. Something so precious. Why would you miss the opportunity? Rabbi, it's just great.
Because it's fun. That's why it's fun. That's why you're going to lose it, because you don't see the bigger picture. That's exactly the reason.
Well, folks, I'm going to wind it down because I got to get ready for my next class, Beyond the Seven. We're doing the 48 Ways to Wisdom with Rabbi Aaron David Poston. Starts in about 20 minutes or so. But I just so appreciate Pirkei Avos, the ethics of the fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. So, Hashem willing, we're okay for next week, Rabbi?
We got plenty of material. We didn't even get through a quarter what I was going to get through, so that's good. And next week is the day before the Super Bowl. We're going to have fun with that also, maybe.
Oh, that's right. So,
maybe.
Till then, folks, we're going to sign out.
Watch Super Bowl, don't watch next week.
All right. I think I'm going to be here with you, Rabbi. So till then, folks, I'm signing out. I got to head out, folks.